Well, good day, my friends. It's your old pal, Jordan the Lion. How are you all doing today? I hope you said great. Today we're in Tampa, Florida, and we are going to talk about the life of Terry Bollea, Hulk Hogan. We recently lost Hulk Hogan, and I was reading his book, reading a lot of the stories of his early life, and a lot of it was stuff I had never ever heard of. So I decided next time we go down to where he's from, I want to go to Port Tampa, see his childhood home, how he all got started and everything, and that's what we're going to do today. Daze with Jordan the Lion, you all, the great Hulk Hogan, Terry Bollea, it begins right now. Even though Terry Bollea was actually born in Augusta, Georgia, he only lived there for a year, so he said he never considered himself a Georgian. He always considered himself a Tampa boy. And he was raised in the area just south of Grandy. So he said he was called a sog. That's what they called him, south of Grandy. He said it was kind of like the old adage of being from the wrong side of the tracks. He said if you lived over here where he lived in Port Tampa, you were kind of considered, you know, lower class or kind of a troublemaker. And he said his brother Alan, he had an older brother, Alan was 8 years older. He said he was like the definition of this neighborhood, but Terry was the opposite. He was always a loner. So here we are over on Paul Street, and this was Terry Bollea's neighborhood. It's a pretty nice neighborhood now. Said it was very working class when he was growing up. And he said at the core of who he is, despite him being a wrestler and his size and everything, the core of who he was a person who did not like confrontation and did not like physical altercations. So he basically said he tried to avoid that his whole life. So it was a big shock to him of all people when he would become a wrestler. Now he grew up in this neighborhood, and he said his life was this neighborhood. The family moved here when he was about 1.5, and he lived here till about his senior year. And then when his leg got broke, he came back and lived with his parents again. This was his parents' home. He said the house that we're going to show you, it's kind of funny, it was sold back in the early 2000s, and the guy who bought it, I think, still might be the same owner to this day. He said that he didn't know whose house he was buying, that it was Hulk Hogan's childhood home, till the day of closing. He said he showed up to close on the house, and Terry Bollea himself was here because he was the registered owner of the home. So it's actually this little house right here, 2-bedroom house. He said that he and his 8 years senior brother Alan would share a room, and they were both so big that they couldn't fit twin beds in their room, so they would have to lay like oblong on the floor. How crazy is that? And he was a big kid, and he said he had happy times here at this house. In fact, he said his parents were great parents. His father was a pipe fitter who became a foreman, and so he made $200 a week, and his mom was a homemaker. So they basically just lived off his father's salary. Now here's the driveway. This kind of becomes important because Terry ends up making so much money as a teenager playing music that he was able to buy himself a Mopar Roadrunner car and would park it up here. And one night he said he was pulling in, and he said as soon as he pulled in this driveway, somebody pulled in right up here and said, "Hey, your brother's been shot." So he said he raced off to the bar, and it was actually his friend, it was Terry's friend's mom who owned the bar. He gets there and finds out, like he said, his brother was a total hellraiser. He said he found out that what his brother liked to do was he liked to drop acid, get drunk with his friends, and then go out and pick fights, like literally start fights anywhere he could. And he had went out one night with his friends, picked a fight, and beat up the guys, left that bar, went over to Terry's friend's mom's bar, got into a fight over there, and then grabbed the mom, who was the owner of the bar, by the head, smashed her head into the bar, and she shot him in the back. And he actually walked out and drove himself to the hospital. So Terry said his whole life growing up, because his brother was so much older and he was that kind of personality, that he would have times where he would be woken up out of his sleep and his brother would be like, "Hey, somebody jumped me. I need you to come help me." And he said, just being groggy and not in those days, not knowing what his brother was really like, he would go and do it. But he said he realized soon enough that his brother was a real troublemaker. So he lived kind of the exact opposite life. He said he was a real happy kid here. He said he could remember in the backyard here playing with his little Tonka trucks and picking up gravel with those trucks. And then he said he would stick the gravel up his nose holes, and his parents would come out and yell at him, tell him to blow the rocks out. He said just kind of funny things that you remember about being a kid. But he said he would often drive through this neighborhood as an adult after he was, successful and everything, and he would admire at how small the neighborhood seemed. But he said from the earliest age, he was always a fat kid. And he said he got bullied relentlessly for it. He said, in fact, from his brother, his brother's friends, he said everybody in the neighborhood was on him. And he said he could remember his first fight actually taking place right here where we're standing. He said he was out here collecting caterpillars the way kids do, taking them out of the trees and off the trees and off the ground and everything. And he said there was a kid that lived about 3 houses down, and he said he was a redheaded kid that always bullied Terry. And he said one day when I was out here collecting those little caterpillars, he said I put them in a glass jar and put the jar down on the sidewalk, and then I ran inside real quick for maybe just a minute or two, and when I came back out, he said everything was taken out of my jar, and that kid was over there laughing about it. So Terry said he went over and he just, he got so mad that he went after the kid, and the kid pushed him and he fell down and broke the jar, and it split Terry's finger. And so he said he was so mad, he was screaming, and his mom was inside, and he said he was screaming, and the kid started running home because he got scared. So Terry said he grabbed a rock off the street, picked it up and threw it, and nailed the kid in the back of the head, and the kid just dropped to the ground. So he said he was relentlessly bullied growing up, but he said he found solace in baseball. He was a good baseball player. He was huge. He said compared to all the other kids on his team, he said he was much, much bigger, like a foot bigger. And he said his head was gigantic. They had to get a special big helmet, and that was the only helmet that he could fit into. So he said he would be, just bullied relentlessly even out playing baseball, because he said when he was the big kid on the team, they always expected him to hit home runs, which he said he did do a lot of. But he also said, if I didn't, I couldn't run. So he said one time, he said, I remember hitting a ball that should have been an easy double, and I went around first base and I was gassed out. I just couldn't run. And he said they threw me out and everybody laughed, and the other kids told me I should be wearing a bra and that I was, fat and this and that. So he said that really, really stuck with me. So when he went to junior high, because he was so big, he said everybody pressured him to play football and to wrestle. But he said, I didn't have any interest in that because I didn't like that kind of confrontation. I didn't like to be physical. He said, even though I was a big guy and my dad was really a strong guy and his dad was a strong guy, so it was like in our blood to be strong, he said, I just didn't want to do it. And he said one day, he said, the other thing that I hated about school, other than being, people trying to force me into that, was phys ed. He said, because I was so fat, I didn't like to do the phys ed stuff. And he said, of course, my phys ed teacher turned out to be the wrestling coach. And one day he had his star wrestler in there and he said, hey, Terry, I want you to wrestle him. And he said, I was scared to death. He said, I had no experience. I didn't know anything about wrestling. But he said, just out of pure fear, he said, I was able to hook the guy's arm and pin him. He said, well, the teacher got so mad that he said, okay, now you can take me on. He said, and this guy was big. This guy was like 300 pounds. He said, now granted, when I was in 6th grade, I was already 6 foot tall and 200 pounds myself. So you can imagine how big he was in junior high. But he said, the coach went after him and they started wrestling, and he ended up pinning and hooking the coach. He said, and the coach actually chased him out of the school. And he said he came home, told his parents, and the parents went to school the next day, talked to the administrators, and Terry didn't have to go back to phys ed anymore. They figured basically that day was pretty much enough. But he said he did try football for a short time because people were on him so much because of his size. But he said, after a couple of weeks, I just didn't have any interest. I didn't have any interest in wrestling. But he said, but I did end up getting interested in music. And so he said, when I told my parents I wanted to play music, he said, that's the one cool thing about my folks. Anything that I was into, they supported. You know, when I was a kid and I saw wrestling on TV and I wanted to go to the matches, my dad made sure that he took me. And he said, when I showed interest in playing music, he didn't go out and just buy me a department store cheap guitar. He went out and bought me a $300 Guild guitar, and I learned how to play that thing. And he said, and I loved it. He said, I would play it all the time. His mom had a piano inside, so they would play together. So he just naturally said he felt like he was always good at math, and he said he felt like math and music kind of went hand in hand, so it was very easy for him to learn. So he got so good that he formed a band with a couple of his friends, where it was him on guitar, one of his friends on guitar, and then they had a drummer, no bass player. And he said that kind of fizzled out. He said then we formed kind of like a real band where we did covers, and we got so good that we were getting hired to go play dances and things all over the place. So he said his dad and the other guitar player's dad would actually drive them around, and the dad who was driving them around, his wife was the one that ended up owning the tavern that Terry's brother ended up getting in the fight at. So kind of a crazy tie-in. But he said he played in that group through junior high. And then when he got into high school, he said there was like a local celebrity, this local lady who put together like a dinner theater act, and she would get local high school kids to play in her group, and she would pay them. So he said, you know, throughout his later years in high school, he was playing in a lot of that kind of stuff. And he said his senior year, because that gig would give them each hotel rooms, he basically never spent any time here at his house. He would always sleep in the hotel room and then go to school from there. But he actually did graduate high school. Now you'd think that would be his path, being good at music, but he said there was a couple of things about that. He said one big thing about him was that he never wanted what he called the typical Florida Tampa life, which is right out of school, you get a job, you work there for 20, 30 years till you can retire, you get married, you have kids, you go home, and you know, that's basically your life. He said, I wanted anything but that. I wanted something different. He said, in playing music, I saw that that was definitely an opportunity. But he said, as I was playing music and stuff, and then I got out of high school, he said, I kind of figured I need to do something else, you know, I need like a trade or something. So he said, so I applied to 3 different places here in town, Anheuser-Busch, Tampa Electric, and he said another place. He said none of them ever called me back. He goes, and I was just such a molded, or like a moldless piece of clay at that time. Any job I would have got, I probably would have stuck with, you know. But he said a couple of things kind of changed that ended up making him go in a different path. One thing is that he said his mother used to take him to church when he was growing up. His father sometimes would go, but he said his father looked at it more like, okay, I'll go for this 1 hour a week, and then I don't want to be bothered with it for the rest of the week. So he said it wasn't a real big part of his life until one of his friends in junior high said, hey, Terry, the youth ranch needs a guitar player. Do you want to come join the youth group? And he said he really hadn't ever thought about, you know, he said he believed in heaven, and that he always knew, like, if I just do good, I'll go to heaven. That's the way he kind of lived his life, he said, up to that point. But he said, you know, they said that there would be girls there, and he said, I wasn't good with women at all, but I just thought, well, maybe this is a chance to, like, be around other people, make friends, and really just to play music. He said back then church songs were all like 3-chord songs that anybody that could play could really do. So he said he went, and he said he ended up falling in love with everything there. He fell in love with how the pastor would preach and how he would make you see what they were talking about. And he said he started to realize that it wasn't about how much good he did, and that he said he realized that everything came down to just accepting Jesus Christ was your Savior, and that we're all sinners, and that as long as you accept Jesus Christ, that you'll always be saved and you'll always have a place in heaven. So he said that was a big thing for him. For years, he said he really got into it and really understood it. And he said, and for later on in life, sometimes he would forget that God was in control, and he would try and make decisions on his own, try and steer the path. And he said every time it blew up in my face. Now, the other big thing that changed in his life was, he said a friend of his one day just said, "Hey, Terry, can you give me a ride over to the gym?" So he said he drove his friend over to Hector's gym over on Platt Road. And he said, when I got there, he said, my friend said, "Why don't you come in with me?" Terry said, I normally would have said no, but he said for some reason that day I just said yes. And he said, when I walked in, everybody there was nice to me. He said, I was a fat guy, and I walked in and expected all these muscle heads to look down on me and tell me I didn't belong. But he said, as soon as I walked in, one of the guys goes, "Hey, you're here to work out with us? You want to join our group?" He said, and then they would take me around. They would show me everything. They would not, try and embarrass me, not put too much weight on, just do what I could do. He said, and then they would say like, "Hey, you're pretty good at this." And he said, that's all it took. He said, just having somebody be nice to me and say, "You're good at this." He said, all of a sudden, I found myself wanting to go back to the gym. He said, at first I would go for maybe 2 days a week. And he said, I wasn't seeing much of a change, but I knew if I kept going that something would change. He said, I knew physically I wasn't seeing much, but my grip and my strength and everything was getting really strong. So he said after a year, he realized that he had lost the weight. He could, for the first time, go to the beach and take his shirt off. And he said he was started watching wrestling again. And he ended up, while he was in that band, he was doing these bands all through high school, and then even when he went to college, he was playing in the bands. He also was interested in wrestling now too. He said his parents were supportive of anything he ever wanted to do, and that kind of went hand in hand. So when he went to college, he went to Hillsborough Community College. He got a associate's degree, 2-year degree there, and then he said basically he didn't know what he wanted to do there. So then he went to USF, and he said there he basically discovered between the music and the wrestling that he just wasn't into it. So he told them, "Hey, I want to leave college and I want to go play music." So he said, they said, "Okay, Terry, if that's what you want to do." He said, well then, within a couple of months of playing music professionally, the wrestlers started coming into my gigs. All these wrestlers that I love, like superstar Billy Graham. His all-time favorite was Dusty Rhodes. He said Dusty Rhodes was coming in, and he was befriending these guys and starting to get to know them and everything. And he started thinking like, maybe I want to be a wrestler. Because he said I would look around in these clubs every night and I'd say, I'm getting tired of playing the same bars. I'm tired of playing the same clubs, the same songs, all this stuff the same. That's kind of what I didn't want in life, was for every day to be the same. So he started thinking about maybe wanting to get into wrestling, and even asked superstar Billy Graham about it and said, "Hey, I've heard about steroids. Have you ever heard anything about those?" And he said, superstar said, "No, I don't know anything about those." But he said it's kind of ironic that he would say that, because later on they would find out that like Billy Graham was one of the first to do steroids in wrestling. So he lived here all through growing up. Like I said, then when he was like a senior, he basically was living in the hotel because of the gig, and then got his own place in North Tampa for a while. But then once he started getting into wrestling and got his leg broke, he came back here to recuperate for 10 weeks. When I saw an interview with people that own the house, they said once they bought the house, every once in a while they would hear like a rumbling of a big engine coming down the street, and they said they would always know it's him. He would like to come back and just kind of see his old neighborhood.